if you want something to change, something has to change. Many leaders just don't make a change. They're in the hamster wheel, keep doing the same thing.
Welcome to the In-Between, a space for anyone navigating from the familiar to the unknown. Whether you're facing a personal, professional, or spiritual disruption, these conversations are here to help guide you through the questions, uncertainties, and opportunities that come with change. Hear from leaders, thinkers, and storytellers who found their way forward, and learn how you can too. No matter where you're starting, you don't have to navigate this alone. All right, today I'm sitting down with Cory Carlson, executive coach, speaker, and author of 2 books, Win at Home First and Rise and Go. After decades in corporate leadership, Cory walked away from a high visibility role to help leaders win at home and work. Cory, thank you for being here.
Evan, thank you very much for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. So let's start here. Before Win at Home First and Rise and Go, before the coaching platform, what cracked open a season of transition for you?
Oh, when you invited me to be on this podcast about transitions, it's like, I've had so many transitions. I mean, and so have all the listeners. And I think when we're in a current transition, it feels so weighty and heavy and we feel lost and there's a fog. But when we look back at our life, we're like, wow, think of all the transitions I've been in, but yet I got through them. Mm-hmm. I was able to get through them. I'm a man of faith, so God helped me get through them, or my community helped, and my wife, and so anyways, it just, as we talked, I knew we were going to talk about transitions. I was like, man, there's just a lot of transitions, and some of those big level transitions for me is we've lived in 3 cities. Started my career in Kansas City to then Denver, and now we live in Cincinnati. Transitions from different jobs where I was worked for an engineering company. I was a civil engineer by degree. Then I did sales for a construction company where we sold civil engineering type products. And then I became president of sales of a national general contractor. And then, so I had those corporate jobs. All those were transitions. And then I transitioned into an entrepreneurial world of now coaching and speaking. So there's been numerous transitions in my life. And, I think the transition, or at least that to answer your question, what got the book going? There's a moment where I was vice president of a $120 million division. It was when I got transferred to Cincinnati. And the division I worked for, we were the largest EBITDA, or largest profit contributor to an overall billion-dollar company. So even though we were about 10% of the revenue, we ended up being about 30% of the profit for the company. So that meant we got a lot of visibility. That visibility came with giving me a little bit of imposter syndrome, because executives were always asking questions about the division, always on. And so I was like, I've always got to be working. I quit going to the gym. I stopped quiet times. Kids would be playing on the floor and I had my face buried in my laptop on the couch. I was like, there's got to be a better way. And I went to my boss, who I really liked, still in touch with him today. And I just said, hey, I need help. And I didn't explain everything, but I gave a overall description. And he said, hey, get an executive coach. I've always had one. Mm. So I hired my first executive coach in July of 2013, and it changed my life. And that would be the beginning of this transition. And the reason it changed my life is, well, 1, it's what I do for a living now. But 2, it just allowed me to zoom out and look at life from a bigger perspective. It wasn't just about this P&L, profit and loss statement. It wasn't about a clean email inbox. Yes, those have their importance. But it was about, what's my purpose and what are my priorities? So as I started to unpack that for myself, I then took another corporate move. That's when I became the president of sales for another company. But all that process of having a coach, loving having a coach, then coaching my employees to talk about home and work, that's when I was like, I want to do this for a living. Mm-hmm. So that's how it happened, Evan. And now I get to do this full time for a living, which is just incredible.
I love it, Cory. So, what were some of those questions that you initially started asking, or the coach started helping you ask?
I think the couple ones I was kind of mentioned is like, what's my purpose? What are my priorities? Evan, in my 20-year career, I had 18 bosses in one family.
Wow.
And listeners probably have very similar numbers. But I made decisions and sacrifices for these 18 bosses, some of which I don't know, to be honest, if they're still alive. Like, I don't know where they live. I don't know them, but yet I have one family. And so the point of that, and what I was learning back there with my coach is, if I don't know what my priorities are, if they're not established, and everyone else is going to tell me what they are, whether it's culture, social media, a boss. And so I needed to have things in place to start to help me. So that's when I really started to think through, what does that work-life balance look like? And what are my priorities? And what am I doing about planning for the year? Do I have my weekends planned out to know that I'm going to go on a date with my spouse? Do I have time spent to be with friends? In that overall piece, what was helping me kind of shape it all together, that, hey, it's not just all about work. It's not just about the boardroom. It could be the boardroom and the family room. Mm-hmm. And those were some of the questions I started asking myself that was opening my eyes to a new way.
Yeah, it sounds like in several conversations that I've had, values always comes up. Like, would you say that's part of what was happening, is you were just clarifying your core values, the things that were important to you, really beginning to get crystal clear on, well, when I think about the whole big picture, these are the things that are actually the most valuable or important to me?
Yeah, values were for sure very important. But I think what can be interesting with some of the information that's out there, we could spin it to where it works both places. Like for me, if my values were to be a man of integrity, well, I could be an integrity as a workaholic. I mean, I'm still a good man. I'm still pricing correctly. I'm being nice to my employees, being nice to the subs. And so I was still like trying to live in values of being nice and integrity and serving the customer and those elements, and that was a piece of it. But where was I spending my time? This idea, it's not just time management, it's choice management. And so that became the thing for me. It's just like, hey, I can't just be giving it all away to the outside world, outside of my company. I can't give it all to the company and then go volunteer to all these nonprofits, and I'm giving everyone else the best of me, and then when I come home, they just get the rest. And I'm collapsing. And so I had to think through my day being like that gas tank, that gas gauge, where what am I doing throughout the day so that, Evan, when our day's over when our head hits the pillow, not when we walk through that front door. And so there was a part of me that for a while I was leading where my day ended when I walked through that front door. Mm-hmm. And I know there's listeners listening where their day ends right there. It's like, oh, I'll just chill out on the couch. I worked hard today. I'll have pizza and beer. Mm-hmm. I had to figure out how do I make choices that I can make it all the way to the end of the night. Mm-hmm. And where it's being intentional, it's putting the phone away. It's figuring out towards the end of your workday, how do you put fuel in the tank? Maybe it's listening to, some certain type of music on the way home instead of sports radio or podcasts on politics. Maybe it's quiet time on the way home. But whatever it is to help you with your re-entry back in your home so that you could give the family what they deserve, which is a great version of you.
You mean a podcast on politics doesn't lower your blood pressure?
Not at all, man. That's why I can't do it.
Yeah, me either. To the extent that you're comfortable, were there dynamics in your family that were beginning to reveal hey, a change needs to happen? And if so, what did that look like, or what did those conversations start to look like?
Hey friends, I want to pause just for a moment. If you're navigating the complex and emotional process of leaving a mission-driven role, whether that's been ministry, nonprofit work, or any purpose-driven career, you're not just looking for a new job. You're wrestling with things like the personal, professional, and spiritual dynamics that come with all of this. Maybe you're asking things like, who am I outside of this role? What skills do I even have that can translate into the future? Will I ever find work that feels meaningful again? If this is resonating, download Finding Your Way to Flourishing. It's a free guide that I've put together for mission-driven leaders who find themselves in the midst of transition. This isn't just another guide, it's a thoughtfully crafted resource that's designed to help you begin processing your identity beyond the role that you're leaving. It can help you pinpoint which skills you can confidently bring into your new and next role. It'll help you lean into your faith and find peace during the midst of this uncertainty. Not overwhelming, it's not complicated. It's just the first step to getting some clarity and moving forward. You don't have to figure this all out alone, and I'd love to walk this journey with you. This guide is completely free, and you can grab your copy today by clicking the link in the description or in the show notes. Let's start making some sense of this transition together. Okay, now back to the conversation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that pop up, but if I'm not investing in myself, like getting my workouts in, getting my quiet time, and then I'm going to be more irritable around the house. I'm going to lack empathy. I'm going to not ask questions and be curious because I don't have time for it. Instead, I'm just going to say statements and make assumptions and jump to conclusions. And then how that played out with everybody in the family is just not great relationships with the kids and my wife. My wife and I not going on dates. Me not being intentional about doing one-on-one dates with my kids. And so there's a part of it you've got to be intentional with your own personal time so that you can show up as your best at work and home. But then there's this other part. It involves planning. Planning that my wife and I get a date on the calendar. Planning that I can get some time on my teenage daughter's calendar before it's all booked up. And planning to how to even connect. I've got a college daughter, and so we have Zoom calls from time to time. That just doesn't happen spontaneously. I've got to get on her calendar, which is fine, which is great. But we get on our employees' calendars, we get on our customers' calendars, and we make that a priority. I had to start making one-on-ones with my family a priority and spending time with them.
I can imagine, I feel a level of conviction around this. I can imagine others do too who are listening. Like, are there one or two practicalities? Like, how do you start to implement that or build that into your life?
Yeah, starting with yourself. What's quiet time look like? Whether that's if you're a person of faith, that's in scripture. You're not a person of faith, and that is just walking the dog with zero headphones on and just thinking. If it's journaling, but all of us have to slow down from all the inputs of the world. And so one is some form of a solitude. Number two is relationships. Are you spending time with friends? Are you going on dates with your wife or husband, for the lady listeners? Are you being intentional with your kids? Working out. What is that? How are you managing your time and energy? A lot of times, Evan, when I work with clients, I'm not trying to get them to have more working hours, like awake hours. Matter of fact, some of them I'll probably tell them to sleep more. But it's just, what do you do in your hours that are different? For example, every listener can afford an alarm clock. They should buy an alarm clock, and that's how they wake up in the morning, as opposed to their phone. Because when you wake up to your phone, the first thing you look at is the news of the world. Did your team win last night? How the stocks? Maybe you find out there's a bombing somewhere, or you start the day angry, disappointed, sad, whatever that feeling is, and that can start to drive your day. And I charge my phone in the kitchen every night. So what that does is I'm increasing the gap from night when I look at my phone when I go to bed, and then in the morning when I wake up to when I first look at my phone. And all that does, Evan, is I'm still sleeping the same amount. It's just I'm getting better sleep. And when I go to sleep, I'm not stressed about the emails I've just read or maybe something I saw on social or on news. Same thing in the morning. I'm waking up controlling my thoughts, thinking through gratitude, thinking through my thoughts for the day. So those are things that we can do as leaders just to show up better at work and at home.
That's good stuff. So in your work with leaders over the years, have you noticed trends or similarities? Like, what keeps people stuck or spinning in the same cycles?
So a lot of times, if you want something to change, something has to change. Many leaders just don't make a change. They kind of they're in the hamster wheel, keep doing the same thing. Some of it's out of comfort. Some of it out of, fear, fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And just, kind of, sitting through. I lead a community for men called Rise. And it's just been a blast. We launched it in January, and at the time of this recording, we've got over 70 guys in there from over 20 states. It's just been a blast. And we have weekly leadership coaching calls, and every month we have a guest speaker. Yesterday's guest speaker was a guy by the name Kent Chevalier. He's the Pittsburgh Steelers chaplain. Great talk, but he talked about doing it afraid. That is like his mantra. He'll have a book coming out next year, but called "Do It Afraid." Mm-hmm. And really, I will not do his talk justice at all. It was just fantastic. But the idea of many of us just don't want to take the risk. We don't want to leave the company. We don't want to write the book. We don't want to launch the podcast. We don't want to start the new endeavor. We don't want to ask the person out, like whatever it is, because there's fear of failure. There's fear of rejection. What if no one shows up? What if no one buys it? And we all have it. I have it before. I have it. I mean, think how, for the listener and even for you, Evan, how much does fear hold us back?
Mm-hmm.
It robs us of things. I mean, who knows? I mean, I would have launched Rise a lot sooner, but I was scared. Mm-hmm. What if nobody shows up? There's already a lot of communities out there. There's already opportunities, for guys to get involved with things. And so fear is what caused me to not launch it a couple years ago.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And what I see happen with a lot of people I talk with is great ideas. No one's short of ideas. Mm-hmm. We got different ideas. It's just the guts to go after it. Mm-hmm. And really, so with coaching, part of what I work with on clients is what do you want to go after? Like, what do you want? Such a powerful question.
Do you find that people have an easy time answering that, or does it take them some time?
It takes time. I mean, it just takes time to slow down. I mean, if you just catch someone in the busyness of day running from meeting to meeting, hey, what do you want? I want a break. I want a break. That's what I want. But if you get someone to slow down and answer some questions, and oh man, yeah, they'll think it through. Mm-hmm. I have my clients go through an exercise, basically, what do you want? And I had a client list out all these items he wanted, and they would be very similar to what you and listeners would have, and it's to be a better father, a better spouse, a better leader. All these items were on their list, and one of them was to paint again. And I was like, what? That's wild. Tell me more. Tell me about to paint again. And he mentioned that as career took off, got married, kids, all the things, he painted less and less and less. But he's having this burning desire to do it again. He's kind of keeping it to the side because he didn't know he'd be able to do it or could do it. And I believe a lot of the ideas we get planted are, not from us. In the standpoint, delight in the Lord, He'll give you the desires of your heart. And so as I was sharing, this client's name was Kyle. Hey, Kyle, what if If you pursued painting again, you would show up as a better father, as a better husband, as a better leader. After some discussing it further, he agreed. He wanted to give it a go. So over our coaching calls, we still talked about work and home and being a better leader at both places. But we also just started kind of dropping in painting. Hey, did you make time in your calendar to paint? Did you go buy the paintbrushes? Did you buy the canvas? And he started making steps towards it. One day I get a delivery to my house, and it's an incredible painting. It's a picture of a 4-person tandem bike because I led a coaching call with him and 3 other guys. That's the 4 people. And it's incredible. But Evan, I'll tell you, I didn't know what kind of painter I was promoting. I mean, I didn't know if he was like crap but he was really good. It's like studio quality art that it hangs up in a focal point in our house. But it all started with asking Kyle, what do you want? And then having him sit and reflect and just write down. Some ideas were probably crazy. Some were realistic. Some were not. Some were old ideas that kind of got brought back to life. Some were new. Some big, some small. For the listener, list out, what do you want? What are the things that are on your heart to go pursue? And from there, just look at the list, pray over the list, talk to friends about the list, and there'll be some of those items that are going to percolate to the top to go after.
So the things that are percolating to the top is there an actual process to that? Like, to actually giving yourself permission for certain things to percolate to the top, to permission to overcome that fear? Or is it more just like this gut instinct, like, yeah, I really realize that these 2 or 3 things are the things that are maybe the most interesting for me to pursue, but I have a hard time verbalizing that or giving myself permission? Or is there like an actual process to actually really honing in? What are those 2 or 3 things out of this list that I should actually go after?
I'm sure someone's got some process. I don't know what the exact process is. I'll tell you what my life has been and how I've helped others is, kind of come up with a list, pray about it, talk to loved ones about it, people that know you well, and hey, what do they see you doing, or have they ever you talked about it before? Like when I transitioned into coaching, for example, I wanted to coach. I didn't have the guts to go into coaching. At the time, I was president of sales. I was making the most money I'd ever made at that time. So I had some identity into the title president of sales. I had some provision security of having our insurance paid by a company, making the most money I had ever made. So I had these elements. I didn't have the guts to go coaching, but I wanted to go coaching, and I felt that was kind of what I was getting called to go do next. Didn't have the guts. We went through this whole kind of process, like my wife and I talking about it. I talked about it with others. I did do a little coaching on the side just to see, do I really like it, or does this just kind of a random idea? I did like it, still didn't have the guts. I tell my clients all the time, be bold, be courageous, go after your dreams. And I was kind of stumbling along and even going after it. Well, eventually, our company, we went to market to be sold. We were unsuccessful, which when you're unsuccessful in a corporate sale, it's kind of like a house. If you go sell a house and someone gets under contract and all of a sudden they back out because of something they saw in the inspection, well, anyone who else was looking at the house is like, no, I don't want it. Or if I buy it, I'm buying it for half what I was going to offer. Same thing happens with companies when they are sold, and that's what happened to us. So the people who sign on dotted line on the 45th day of the 60-day process, they backed out. Anyone else who was in line was like, we'll pay half. Well, our private equity group did not want that, which obviously makes sense. Well, we downsized from being national to being regional. In that process, I was president of sales. You don't need a national president of sales if you're going regional. So I got terminated. August 2016, I got fired. And I called my wife. I said, babe, I got good news, bad news. Bad news is I just got fired. And that sucks. But the good news is I got a 4-month severance package. Can I try coaching? And she said, yes. but you got 4 months, then go get a real job. But the point of that is, if I would have said, hey, can I go try, bull riding? She would have said, what? You've never mentioned bull riding. I don't even know why that came to mind right now, but because I was talking about coaching, because I was sharing some dreams with her along the way. By the way, not all those conversations were amazing, in the process, but she at least knew it was something I was thinking about. So when I had this opportunity for this transition, she was supportive and said, go for it. And therefore I was able to hustle. So I think for whatever someone's going to write on a piece of paper of what they want, there has to be an element. You've talked to a spouse about it. You've talked to a good friend about it. So when you said, I'm going to go write this book, or I'm going to go start this company, or I'm going to go X, Y, Z, they're like, yeah, makes sense. You've been talking about it for a while. That's cool. Go for it. You're going to crush it.
I have another episode. I had a conversation with Joe Boyd, and I've gone through this exercise with him a couple times, and you just start writing. And I have found, just hitting on you talking about writing things down, like there are things that will come out of writing that maybe have been in the recesses. Maybe you've been afraid to verbalize them, but there is something very powerful in getting that out and onto paper that in many ways is empowering, or even permission's probably not the right word, but it kind of gives you that boost to start moving forward. Because what I found is that when I started writing things down, there were dreams that I didn't quite understand how to make happen, but there were steps that I did realize that I could take along the way that I kind of had a grasp on. Well, I know I could take this step to move towards that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I agree. There's something significantly powerful about writing and allowing those things to surface. And you're probably going to see like, oh, wait, no, I have been talking to my wife or to my friend about this for the past year, 2 years, 3 years. Like you're going to be able to start to connect those dots. One thing you mentioned was identity, and that's something that I do like to hit on in these conversations. For you, what was that tension like of, for me, I was a pastor for 18 years of my work. And it was very easy for me to get to allow my identity to be wrapped up in this role, in this title, in leadership, in all of the things that I, sensed or found meaning in those things. Was that a wrestling match for you, particularly at the level of leadership that you were in? And if so, like, what was it like untangling your worth, your value, who Cory Carlson is from those roles?
Absolutely. I mean, identity is a problem then. It's a problem. It can be a problem now. That I have to continually remind myself that I am not what I do, no matter what is happening. And I'm not my accomplishments. I'm not my book sales. I'm not my LinkedIn followers and likes. When I was president of sales, I for sure had to kind of untangle from that identity to understand, because that was a big move of going from president of sales to basically low-level coach. There was a real identity, but it was awesome. I mean, I worked through it and got to the point where I did enter the market as this, entry-level coach, and so was able to do it. However, Evan, we can't put our guard down because it's going to creep up again, identity being something else. My podcast, I have a podcast called Win at Home First. I think it was a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, where I felt in a quiet time that I was, just as I was reflecting, that my identity was becoming the success of my podcast. That was a hat I was wearing, because the podcast, we had some great downloads, high, and then maybe it dropped down low, and my mood and identity was starting to go up and down with the podcast downloads. And I kind of through reflection, I just felt this, prompt, whatever it was, that my identity was in my podcast and I needed to take a break. I hit pause on my podcast for 6 weeks. I hit pause, and then at the end of the 6 weeks, I felt in quiet time, almost like permission, good, like, well done. You can go back to your podcast if you want. And I went back to my podcast, and there's a third party called Libsyn where you go to look at your stats on podcasts. Before that 6 week break, I was looking at it daily. Maybe how some people look at their social media likes, dislikes, how they look at their stock market. I was looking at Libsyn podcast stats daily. When I came back and I felt really freed from my identity as a podcast, man, I went months without looking. Even to this day, which is, like I said, a year and a half later, I'll look at Libsyn maybe once a month, maybe every couple months. I'm doing that intentionally. A little bit I really don't care, but I'm also just doing it intentionally because I don't want to get pulled back into it. So identity is, I think we'll all have those big moments of job change or whatever that title is in our life that changes. But I think there's micro elements of identity all the time.
For sure. Yeah. Riding the wave of algorithms, of other people's opinions, even of the expectations of others that we allow to just dictate our life. Man, that is a tough wave to ride, and for sure depleting.
Yep.
Algorithms are not friendly.
No, they're not.
One thing I really appreciate about your work, Cory, is, and you've already hit on it, but the individual, their work, and their home life, these are not separate domains. They ripple into each other. They're woven into each other. Like, I want to hear some about like the men that you've worked with. Like, what happens when they finally face that or accept that connection?
You mean like when a client realizes their work-life balance is out of whack?
It's out of whack. So that's probably part one of the question. And then obviously, like, yeah, my life got better. But do examples come to mind of the impact of that happening?
Yeah, I'm grateful. I've got a lot of examples. But I the examples I've got are, there's one individual where he hired me to help with the culture of his company. We were going to do one-on-one coaching. We were going to work on him showing up better at home and work. But also just with the company, vision and values, and what are our quarterly goals. And on the very first call, as we talked, it was, he had mentioned he'd been married 25 years when we kind of did our consulting interview. But when I talked to him about work, I mean, he was on fire. Like, life's great. We're going to cross a couple hundred employees. We have new products coming out, like high energy. Went to the family, energy goes down. And even his family story didn't involve his spouse. And I just felt this prompting on the call to be like, man, I got to say something. I mean, something's up. It didn't feel right. And I just made a comment. I said, when you hired me, you knew we'd talk home and work. I can tell something's off at home, and there were some other questions. I had some more evidence into this before I made the statement. But do you care if we talk about this situation, about your marriage? And he paused, and I was like, oh my gosh, the biggest contract I've ever had to date, I'm gonna get fired. But then he says, yeah, we can talk about it. Every day I drive home, I get a pit in my stomach. Yes, we can talk about it. And so we did, Evan, and it was hard work. So for that listener who, maybe in that situation, I mean, it was hard work. I encourage this individual, you got to go on a date. He scheduled the date. On the first date, she canceled to go out with other girlfriends. I said, you got to try it again. You got to go again. And they went on a date, and it was pretty choppy. I think they probably both were looking at their phones. I think it stopped early, like 40 minutes in or something. You got to go again. Fast forward, they started going on dates. I remember one call that we had. He was like a kid. He was so excited to tell me that he's like, yo, you won't believe it. And we went downtown and we were walking and we were holding hands. Like, I had a grown man who was president of a company excited to tell me that him and his wife were holding hands. And I, obviously I love hearing those stories. I mean, it breaks my heart that the stories even get to that point. And so for the listeners, I mean, they're assuming the other spouse is not like big into addictions and abuse or whatever, but if all things are somewhat normal, man, there's hope. There's many people that overcome. Heck, some of those couples have overcome the abuses and the addictions. But it's going to take work. It's going to take intentionality. And our spouses know we have meetings set up for quarterly strategies at work. Our spouses know we've got vision and values for our company. They know all the structure and intentionality and organization we have. And then they see us coming home and wing it. And so the opportunity is for all of us, myself included. I mean, I can get so focused on what am I working on, what am I writing, what am I posting, how are my clients doing, that if I'm not careful, I can drift from my kids and from my spouse and my friends. So it takes intentionality, and it never stops. All right? What's one thing vision does? It drifts.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Cory, because in one sense, I did want to help paint a picture for the individuals that are in some of these places, that they can begin envisioning a day where they're holding their spouse's hand again, or being able to get to that place. But yeah, it doesn't always just mean trying something once. Like, man, it does take some work.
Yeah, a quote that it's up on my board right now. It's from Helen Keller. The only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. So I think taking your exercise you talked about earlier about my life is better because ... mixed in with Helen Keller's quote of the only thing worse than being blind is having sight and no vision, is for the listeners, like, what is your vision? Like, where do you want to be in 3 years in your personal life, home, and work? And it may feel aspirational at first, but write it down. And it may feel a little bit impossible. Write it down. Then start to take steps towards that goal, idea, dream.
Yep, for sure. So I want to do a bonus segment, actually, Cory. Rapid fire. We got a couple minutes left. So these can be very quick responses. First thing that maybe comes to the mind, and then I have one last question for you. So let's kind of consider these like rapid fire responses. Is there a leadership? First, are you up for that?
Man, I am way up for it. That'd be awesome.
Okay. All right. So a leadership lesson you learned the hard way.
I'd say taking my identity to work.
Okay. A lie that you used to believe about success.
Success is only at work. Our success is defined by our work.
Okay. Is there a question that you've been asked that helped change your life?
Man, well, it's coming to mind is what do you want, but that's because we've been talking about it. I'm going to stay there. What do you want? It's the first words that John captures in the book of John, what Jesus says when he says, what are you seeking to the disciples?
Yep.
So it must be somewhat important.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, one more. One habit that you wouldn't lead without.
Oh, solitude. reflection, journaling. I miss some mornings for sure, but starting my mornings reading, a devotion, journaling, and prayer.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Final and last question, and this doesn't have to be rapid fire, but it's something that I ask every guest. What does flourishing mean to you nowadays?
Flourishing means having incredible relationships, spending, having a consistent relationship in my quiet time with God, dating my wife and wanting to spend time with her. I've got 3 awesome kids, and being intentional with them and seeing that they want to hang out with me. I mean, that's flourishing, where my relationships are going well.
I love it. I love it, Cory. Man, I've enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate your insights. And if people want to learn more about the work you're doing, follow you a little closer, where do you want to send them to?
Yeah, my website is Cory M as in Michael Carlson.com. So CoryMCarlson.com. I'm on all social media channels, but LinkedIn, that's where I'm active and engage and really enjoy it. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and always interested in answering a DM or jumping on a call with somebody.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Cory. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.